Today we're going to be doing a pre-flight inspection on this Bell 407, owned and operated by PHI. I've got my battery cart since we're going to be looking at the avionics, doing a fuel sample, and my stand, work stand, that I can get up high and get a good view of everything I'm looking at. Let's go ahead and start. Before the pre-flight really begins, I'd like to point out that we use the Bell 407 Daily Pre-Flight Guide. I usually pre-flight and then come back and verify I've done everything via the checklist. I also checked my daily status sheet, make sure, looking at my aircraft total time, and make sure that I'm not coming up on any inspections. You never want to overfly anything. Starting my pre-flight of the pilot cockpit. Starting at the base, make sure there's no obstructions, nothing blocking. Got my pocket right here. Make sure you have all your procedures, checklists. Your iPad's fully charged. Fire extinguishers properly secured. Inspections have been done. Plug my helmet in. This is the rotor brake. As you can tell, do not apply rotor brake above 40% RPM. This is what it would look like possibly with it unlocked. This is fully engaged, so during your pre-flight, make sure it is all the way up and latched. All the circuit breakers and switches are off and in, except for the hydraulic system switch and anti-collision light. Working our way down, check the condition of the window. Make sure it's nice and clean, as you can tell. Nothing out of the norm for the instrument panel, no cracks. Coming on down. Looks good. Let's turn the power on. So turning on the battery switch, you'll hear some buzzing. We're going to mute the horns. There's going to be a total of 5 horns or beeps. You're only going to hear 4 because the first beep's really quick. Here we go. Doing all of its FADEC checks. I'm muting it using the horn mute button. Mute. We'll talk about the gauges here in a second. So after all that's gone out, you should have a total of 9 lights on the instrument panel. There's 10 right now because the cyclic is not in the center position. So we're going to move the cyclic and watch this light's going to go off. I'm going to move the cyclic. You're going to find that sweet spot. Well, there we go. Light is off. You should have a total of 9 lights on the caution warning panel. Press the test button. Make sure they all light up. So with everything up and running, I usually check the battery voltage, make sure it's good, and then since we're going to be doing an extended pre-flight this morning and talking about the systems a little bit, we're going to go ahead and plug in our battery cart. On the front of the aircraft, underneath the pitot tube, there is a external power port. We'll go ahead. You can see in here, there's 3 plugs. One on the left is a small plug, and that's to make sure you plug it in the proper direction. With the battery cart plugged in, 25.4 volts, let's continue our pre-flight. So I've already checked this, but just for the video's sake, we're going to do it again and continue our flow. Make sure all your lights work. If they don't, your pre-flight stops.
Air 1, launch request, center facility transfer, Anne Arundel Medical Center in Annapolis, Maryland, going to GW in Washington, D.C. Air 1, launch request, center facility transfer, Anne Arundel Medical Center, Annapolis, Maryland, Mary Hotel Alpha Alpha, going to George Washington University Hospital, Washington, D.C., Delta Hotel, Golf Whiskey. Stand by phone call 32 after.
So starting at the top, we're going to make sure all of our gauges have power as far as our transmission and engine instruments. So you know they have power. Well, you can see the 0.1 or should, possibly 0.0. See a number, make sure there's power down to the display. And also you can see that there's one little check mark, one little light that's right at the 0. That shows that this gauge has power. Doesn't mean that they all work, but we'll test that here in a minute. So coming on down, make sure they all have indications. This one has our fuel, generator, oil, engine and transmission instrument pressures and temperatures. On our fuel, since we're here, while I'm thinking about it, we know we have 674 pounds, but if I press the forward quantity fuel indicator button, it shows me how many pounds is in the forward cell, which is important, especially if you have a dual transfer pump failure or a electrical failure. Up above the engine and transmission instruments, there's an LCD test button. You press and hold, or you can just press it. It's going to light them all up. You press it and make sure all the tick marks, all the numbers display properly. If you run out of time, do it again. And you can see your MP, NR doing a full sweep. If any of the chiclets are not lit up, the gauge is bad, needs to be fixed or replaced. Top left, at least in our aircraft, is the FADEC horn or FADEC failure horn test button. I'm going to press that, and this is the horn, the sound that you'll hear if you have a FADEC failure. Make sure that works. Here on the right side of the panel, you'll have a pedal stop push to test button. Press it, you'll see a little engage light. That sometimes burns out. Make sure that's turns on. Your light up on the panel will turn on and turn off. And you'll also hear the pedal engage. It's taking me longer due to the video, but you press it. You're going to feel your pedals get restricted from going all the way in, and once the system releases and the light goes off, you'll be able to go in a little bit further. They had some accidents, Bell did, back in the day, and this is one of the mechanisms that they put in place to prevent some tail rotor blades from chopping off the tail boom, etc., to my knowledge. Because I haven't flown the aircraft today, first thing in the morning I like to turn the avionics master on with the battery cart plugged in. Coming on down, this is what I've got. My HTOS and radar altimeter is booting up. Coming on down here, I've got my HeliSAS in standby. Check for the current database in the Garmin, and when I push enter, you'll see HSI do its little test. Got a 2 flag with the left indication. Go and get out of that. It's done with that test. Coming on down to our transponder. Let's see if we can get it in focus here. Coming on down to the transponder, it's got a lot of neat information. We're on our current squawk code. We've got a traffic page. You can check your METARs, current METARs. If it fails its test, you'll know it right on the main screen, but if you want to go up and check the individual tests, you can push the system test button, and you'll hear it talk to you here in a minute. Alright, so it passed its test. Here's my radios, ICS, and radio control unit there. I got my Iris, which is my satellite voice communication and tracking, which is an awesome unit. On the radar altimeter and the HTOS, it's really nice. Pretty basic unit, easy to use. You've got your current decision height, which you can adjust by just simply scrolling the knob. So PHI and most operators, they say 300 feet daytime and a minimum of 500 feet for night times. Right now it's just on 500 feet even though it's daytime. That's okay. We still meet the minimum. You can change the brightness by pulling gently on this knob. And you can choose your brightness, and then when you're done just push it back in. To check the radar altimeter, you push in. You can see here it says RA test, and then over here it says MINS. So that's done, and now you can check your HTOS. So you come over here, push the menu button.
Test, caution. Test, warning.
Make sure you get the audio. And you can change your scale. You can go from 20 miles, and zoom in really close. So I usually have it on maybe 5-10 miles, depending on where I'm at. So we've done all that. All the avionics are complete as far as my checks. I can't check my HeliSAS until the aircraft's up and running, but at least I know it's on standby. So with avionics master off, I can go ahead and check my lights. Position light, do my pulse light, which incorporates the taxi light and landing light. So we'll just go ahead and turn those on the collective. With any aircraft, guys, with any aircraft, develop a good flow, easy to remember for you, and then verify and confirm with your checklist that you've done everything. All right, so landing light's on, and I've got a search light I can flip on. I can move that forward so we can check it on pre-flight. Bell 407 has a landing light, a taxi light, which is underneath, and then a search light, and then forward of the forward cross tube on the left side, co-pilot side, is a red position light, and then coming across on the right side is a green position light. We'll continue walking around the aircraft to check the remainder lights. It's getting a little breezy. Here is another position light. It's working. And a collision light is working. Rear position light is working. Both the tail rotor lights are working. And then our last remaining position light is right there. And it works. We'll turn the lights off and continue our cockpit check. With lights turned off, we're going to check the collective. Or not the collective, but the throttle. We're going to go to idle. Fly, there's a little detent, so it wants to stay in the fly, and then we'll go to max. Back to fly, idle, and it won't go past idle unless you push the button. Push the button and make sure that goes back to the off position. Your FADEC will not do its full check if that is in the idle position. So make sure it's in the off position before you turn the battery on. Otherwise, you'll have to recycle the battery and let it do its checks again. Under the collective, you've got your boarding light for loading a patient on the left side. Make sure that's armed. Here's your ELT. Make sure that is in the armed position, and we got a little cover. Here's your emergency pedal stop release. You can pull that out if your pedal stop mechanism is malfunctioning. Defrost and your collective friction. Make sure those are properly adjusted or off. We also need to check the very frequently used magnetic compass. Make sure it's got the magnetic card or the compass card on the bottom. Make sure it's legible and that there's no evidence of leakage. Make sure it looks like it's working properly. Coming down here to the left of the pilot cyclic is the pilot control for the cabin heat. It's bleed air off the compressor. Make sure that is in the off position, which is in the full down position. Check the condition of the seat belts, functioning of the latches, and also the inertia reel. Give it a nice good jerk, and it should lock and then release when you let it go back in, just like a car would. Check all the seats and seat belts, the front and back. One of the least favorite things to do is the fuel sump. So with the fuel valve off and the boost pumps off, we're going to climb under with my nice mason jar, and we're going to sump it using the aft and forward sump buttons. Just in front of the aft cross tube in the center of the aircraft, you've got your fuel sump point for the aft fuel cell, and then on the PHI aircraft they've plumbed this very nice fuel line, and you can sump the fuel tank just from back here, so it makes it really nice. So with the aircraft on, battery on, and the fuel valve switch off, you can do this sample. Just hold the mason jar under, gloves and eye protection. Just hold the mason jar up to the bottom and then push the aft button. Gives you a good workout. Do about half on the aft cell, and we'll do about a half on the forward cell. So pushing the forward cell. Okay. Do a good fuel sample. With the fuel sample completed, now all you do is swish it, just like avgas. Look for any sediment, water bubbles. Water will settle to the bottom. And just make sure it's a nice clean sample. All done. With the fuel valve on and the boost pumps on, you come out with the engine compartment, engine cowling open, and come up to this, climb up here. This is the airframe fuel filter. Sorry that the lighting is not better. There's a button on top, which really is a two-person operation for the PHI aircraft. They have a guard on top to prevent a button from popping out. So you kind of have to finagle that and then look inside on your caution warning panel to make sure the light comes on. But you'd push that, the light would come on. But to test the airframe fuel, or to sump, drain the fuel filter housing, you'll simply twist that. And a note on this drain line comes in to this drain port right there. If that's clogged up at all, or if it starts overflowing, it's going to fill your engine deck up with fuel, which isn't the end of the world because it's all going to drain out, but it's going to pick up dust, dirt, anything that's laying down here, oil, all that is going to be trapped in your fuel sample. So you can pull this drain line out, of course getting permission from your mechanic, make sure you put it back. You can pull that out for a true sample. For today's purpose, we're just going to let it flow into the drain line and come out the bottom into our bucket, and we'll see what it looks like. Gonna do that. Come out the bottom. See, it's a little messy, a little dirt in there. We just cleaned the engine deck yesterday, so. Watch. Oh, see, whatever was trapped in that line's coming out better now. Like I said, dirt and debris can get caught in that drain, engine drain, or deck drain. Doesn't look the cleanest, but I know it's clean. All that was just in that drain line in the engine pan. So with the airframe fuel filter drained, my bucket caught all of it. Let's go flip the fuel valve off, boost pumps off, and we should be done up here. I'll verify with the checklist after. So flip the guard up, flip that off, boost pumps off, and battery comes off. After I'm done with this, I come back to the nose, verify everything's closed. The battery is right here. I don't get in there. Here's the external power. Make sure that's closed. Pitot tube is clear. Just like on an aircraft, you're looking for obvious stuff. So attachment hardware, there's no loose stuff, nothing falling off or leaking from the aircraft. Here's my wire strike protection. Right there on the bottom, and the upper's up on the roof. Got antennas, landing gear. Once again, condition, security, anything obvious. Here's my static port. There's one on the co-pilot side. Make sure it's clear. Got hinges, doors, latches. Make sure they're all working properly. And make sure your hydraulics, servos, flight controls, cowling is closed. And we're going to start up here. The transmission, we start opening them up. But continue on down here. Everything's secure. Here's my fuel port for my fuel tank. Make sure that's closed. I'll let you guys learn how to do with that. Sometimes they're kind of finicky. All my drain lines and vents right underneath the fuel sump buttons. Don't spray water up those, especially the fuel cell vent. Underneath, this is kind of a neat feature of the 407. Let's see if I can focus here. So the landing gear is not actually attached to the aircraft here. These are just like bump stops. The attachment point is in the very middle. You can see if the lighting is okay, is right here. And what that'll do, that'll allow the whole aircraft to rock on its back legs, so to speak. And that'll prevent the aircraft from getting into ground resonance. Right above that, I always get them mixed up. The evaporator, condenser, you got a little cooler door and intake. This will flip down as an air scoop, and the air will vent out right here. That's for your air conditioning. Once again, antennas, security, vents clear, nothing obvious. Coming back up here, you've got a structural panel right before the tail boom. Make sure all the bolts are in place, which they are. And let's start up here at the transmission cowling or compartment. So with these latches on the access door to the transmission and for the engine, what you do, see if I can get the lighting to be correct. I use one hand to open the latch and the other finger to slow the latch from opening so it doesn't slam open. So you push and then slowly let it up. And then let's open it up and see what we have in here. So with the access door open, we're going to inspect the transmission cowling, transmission compartment on the pilot side. Check for overall condition. You've got some rubber mounts that attach to the transmission, which then are attached to this rigid mount to the airframe. Once again, there's lots of torque stripes. Check for overall condition, security, leakage. There's 2 on each side, one down here, one here. Check the oil fluid level of the transmission gearbox. It's within the yellow marks. Looks good. If it's too high, it's just going to burp out and make a mess. You got a pin, make sure there's no evidence of marking, like the excessive travel from the transmission. This is like an isolation type damper, keeps the transmission from wobbling around too easily. Got a bleed air line, FADEC harness, oil lines. I think this is for an engine rinse. I've never used that though. Coming on in, you've got the main drive shaft, the K-flex coupling. Normally you'd rotate that all the way around, check for any crack or breakage of the torque stripes, any cracks on the K-flex coupling itself. Wiring harness, overall condition, security, no leaks. That's it. Let's go ahead and button this up. Very simple. Push down. Push down. Coming on up. Without these snow baffles on, this would be an easy, much easier inspection as far as the intake for the airframe or the engine. So you're going to check in this sight glass, which is hard to see. The other side's a little bit cleaner. Inspecting this engine during my pre-flight, I usually break it up in 3 parts, combining the compressor accessory gearbox as one section. So pretty much this area, I start from the top, work down, then do the turbine section. So start here and go down, and then from here, which is the combustion section, kind of work my way down all the way to the engine deck. So let's climb up here and see what we can do. Fight with this lighting here. It's really hard today. So coming on up to the top, we got some monopole pickups. I don't see any leaks. Wiring harness doesn't look like it's chafing anything. No metal shavings anywhere. Everything looks like it's properly secured. Here's my engine mount, one of 3 bipod mounts, rigidly mounted to the airframe. I usually come up here and give the engine a little shake to make sure it's rigidly mounted. Got a bleed air line. This a bleed air line coming back up to the top. Turbine section, I got my MGT harness, diffuser scroll. This is my FADEC wiring harness. Coming on down, Hmu, which is a hydromechanical unit. Pretty much it controls your fuel. This is your throttle linkage right here. So when you move the throttle, this is what's actually moving your fuel control. Hmu, when it's in the fly position, it's right about there, and everything lines up. And then of course, now that I've done that, I can't go past that, so I need to go push the idle release and then close the fuel, or close the throttle, which I'm going to do now before I forget. So now that the throttle is closed, kind of continuing on down, we got the starter generator, condition, security, no leaks. There shouldn't be any fluid in there anyway. Got the bipod mount. It's nice and secure. Wiring looks good. Throttle linkage looks good. Engine deck looks nice and clean and dry. Coming back up to the top, once again I usually do like a little S pattern, usually with the flashlight or at least with my finger to help focus my pre-flight. You got fuel lines, the igniter line, drain lines, oil lines going back to the cooler, which is back here. I can inspect the turbo drive shaft. Once again, lots of torque stripes. This is the air conditioning compressor right here. On the other side, we'll look at that better. Check the condition of your belt, and that's it. Make sure the oil cooler intake is clean, no grass, because that can get sucked in right here, which is on the engine cowling door. Before I get down off my work stand, come on up here. Here's your exhaust stack. Make sure there's no cracks. Just condition. Here's the oil cooler. Make sure it's clean. Let's give it a shot. Antenna, and then of course looking on down the tail boom. Just like with any airframe, any aircraft, airplane, helicopter, doesn't matter. There's rivets, there's fasteners. Make sure everything is, all the screws you can see are pointed to the 10 and 3 position. Make sure all your screws are lined up. Make sure your tail boom, you can look down the tail boom. If it's nice and clean, you should be able to see if there's any wrinkles, dents, dings. The most fragile part on this tail boom are the winglets here. That's what I call them. They're easy to ding, easy to damage if you're using a scrub brush. So my recommendations, like most companies, they say use like a microfiber cloth. Don't use a scrub brush, even though it may be a microfiber. Don't use a scrub brush because the handle, the non-soft part of that brush is going to possibly ding up these winglets. Alright, working on down. Make sure there's no dings, properly fastened. Here's my nice vertical fin. Same thing. Here's the stinger. Here's the stinger. I give it a nice little wiggle. We don't do any training in this aircraft, but still check the bottom. So underneath the tail rotor gearbox, on the side, there's a access door. You can open the door if you'd like, if it gives you a better view, which we will do. We're going to wipe down a little bit of oil. This one leaks just a little bit. You can see it right on that rod end. You can check the chip plug. It's really windy out here. And we'll wipe that up and continue our inspection. On the tail rotor gearbox left side, there's this little axis area that you can see. Look in to make sure your tail rotor gearbox oil is at the proper level. Any leakage, wiring harnesses in there, make sure everything looks appropriate. Here's the output shaft of the tail rotor gearbox coming out to your tail rotor. Obviously, this is the tail rotor blade. Check for obvious dings, delamination. If you fly in any amount of rain, you're gonna bleed. You're gonna take off some of the paint off the leading edge. Have your mechanic look at it if it doesn't look good. Here's your accessing flap indicator. So if we pushed in full left or right pedal, the tail rotor would contact this little flap here, and the gap right here would not be uniform, so you could tell if there was potential damage during your pre-flight. Something happened on the previous flight. Tail rotor pitch links, you should be able to turn if any movement, but no, very minimal up and down or lateral movement. These are nice and snug. Make sure all your safety wire, cotter pins are properly installed, and same thing for this other blade as far as inspection. On the top of your tail rotor gearbox, there's this little access cover. Look in here, make sure the filler plug's nice and secure, wiring harness looks good. You can check the condition of this rubber boot, and just check everything in here. Looks good. Let's close it back up. Just in front of the tail rotor gearbox is also another access panel. It has these little mesh holes, but you can check the, I believe it's called the Thomas coupling. Rotate this all the way around. You can rotate the shaft by turning the tail rotor. You can check to make sure all your torque stripes look good. You can check the shaft as it enters your tail rotor gearbox. The 407, I guess, has had issues with the weights, tip weights in the blade, so make sure there's no evidence of anything coming apart out here at the tips of the blade. I'm not sure how long ago that was an issue, but keep an eye on it. Moving past the tail rotor, we're going to move up the fuselage tail boom left side. Look for any dings, dents, fasteners coming loose. Don't push on these winglets. They're not designed for it. Once again, fastening point for the tail boom. Just like the Robinson, make sure it's uniform. You should be able to see an even crack all the way through. Hard to see on this camera, but there you go. It shouldn't be wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. It should be uniform. We'll start at the top, work our way down and forward of this Bell 407. Top view of the tail boom. I'm up here right above the oil cooler. Oil cooler's there, and this is the engine oil reservoir. Pop it open, make sure that's properly fastened, locked, closed, no leaks, and you can see down the tail rotor drive shaft. We'll fasten that back up. Engine oil cooler looks free of obstruction. Checking for cracks. Here's the engine exhaust. Looking on up. Coming on down, we've got the engine oil level, which is the most accurate right after you've motored or run the aircraft. But make sure it stays within limits. We don't usually let it get down below 2 quarts. We don't let it get below add 2 quarts. This aircraft likes to sit at about 1 quart low. Opening up this access door. Check in here. Check for the couplings, torque stripes. Here's the drain valve for the oil cooler. You got some wires in there. It's really hard to see. Looks good. Another thing to check for are the bearings, making sure that they don't look like they've been overheated, like discoloration. With the cowling open to the left side of the aircraft, we're going to start in the similar fashion as we did before. We're going to start from the top, break it up in 3 sections. We're going to go here, here, and here. Looking for any cracks, leaks, anything loose. Here's my rotor brake bipod mount for the engine accessory gearbox. Here's my exciter box. Here's my CFA, that's a combined engine filter assembly for engine oil and fuel. Here's your PMA, which is a source of energy for your FADEC. Coming back here to the output shaft, make sure that seal right there isn't coming out. I guess that's been an issue with Bell. Here's the backside of my Hmu Starter Generator. There's these little red pop-out buttons, little red buttons at LRBs. Those will pop out if there is an impending bypass or if there's too much pressure differential. There's one there and one right here. Get your mechanic to look at it if these pop out. Engine deck looks clean. There's the throttle linkage there on the bottom. Coming back up once again, look for cracks. Anything that does not look normal, it's not rocket science, just don't be rushed. Here's the compressor for your air conditioning. Just looks similar to off of a car. Looks good. Let's close it up and move on to the transmission left side. Opening up the transmission left side. We've got similar things. We've got the main drive shaft with the K-flex coupling. Check for scratches, dings, nicks, breakage of slip torque stripes. You got oil lines, wiring harnesses, Look for leakage, any metal shavings. You got a little red button on your transmission filter, which comes out when there's a certain pressure differential between the different sides of the filter. Once again, torque stripes. And let's move up. Go ahead and close this. Pop. Pop. Snow baffles are nice, but man, they sure make it a pain looking in here. Get a flashlight, look in your engine inlet, make sure there's no bugs or nests, anything that could get sucked into the engine. Coming on up, once again, another view, fuselage top side. You got your antenna, oil cooler, exhaust stack. Get a little vent here. Make sure that's secured and nothing's there. Don't set tools up here. Easy way for them to fall off, damage something, or get left. So for the transmission area, I like to start from the far side. So this is the right side, the pilot side of the transmission. You got the filler plug, make sure that's secure. Here are these 4 mounts, 2 on each side. They're rubber. Make sure the rubber looks good. It's got the cotter pin. There's no banging around. These will fail. So make sure that they are in good condition. You've got a vent line. Once again, security, leakage, chafing marks, anything like that. Here's the other 2 mounts. Make sure those are in good condition. For the hydraulics, you've got little red buttons to check on top, 1 on each. There's 1 right there, and 1 on the top of this housing. You got your hydraulic reservoir. Make sure that there's no bubbles. It's full of nice red fluid. And this is your transmission hydraulic area. Make sure there's nothing that would interfere with the flight controls, all the servos. Your FADEC is right here on the other side where it says no step. Swash plates, the rod ends, nice jiggle. Make sure everything's snug. Coming up to the rotating swash plate. Dust boot, check the condition, no cracks, everything's secure. This head is a greased head, so it's very common, unless you're a mechanic or you wipe it down every day, you'll have some grease that gets slung around the inside of the shroud. And then going to the top of the PCLs, the pitch change links, these are also grease, so you'll find little spatters of grease from time to time, depending on how clean you make it. Working on up the main rotor mast. Make sure all the hardware is properly installed. Cotter pins. Here's Pro Seal, keeps water from penetrating down. Make sure everything looks nice and clean. The soft in-plane rotor system on the 407 is pretty awesome. There's no hinges. There's no bearings, traditional bearings. Everything utilizes these rubber isomeric bearings, type bearings. Dampers. They keep things from moving too loose, but they allow them to move. This whole head flexes, allows it to twist, flap, feather, everything. So, big thing on this rotor head is on these rubber bearings. We're going to look at this one, because this one's a little bit harder to see on video. Looking on up here, you'll be able to see some lines in the rubber. You want to make sure those lines are straight, in line with each other. If they're not, then that bearing is most likely failing. If you start seeing like little pieces of rubber coming off, it's also an indication that you need to get your mechanic to look at it. Other than that, there's no other grease up on this rotor head other than on the PCLs. Big thing to check is just to make sure all the cotter pins, bolts, everything looks secure and is secure. There's lots of safety wire up here on each blade. Rotate the rotor system all the way around. And when you rotate this, you're going to hear some creaking. Listen, this is normal. You'll hear it creak. All those noises very normal on the 407. And up on the top, you've got the main nut that holds everything on. It's covered with Pro Seal around the edge to make sure there's no water moisture entry. Let's climb on up and look at that. Another view of this very nice Pro Seal job. On this side, there's a little lock that's, I believe it's got some safety wire on there, so the lock prevents this big mast nut from loosening up and departing from the aircraft. Once again, put your fingers on all the nuts and bolts, make sure everything is nice and tight, and look down the rotor blade, look for any obvious signs of damage, and also, after you're done, look underneath each blade for any signs of damage. You can get another view from the top side, looking in here of the rubber. So you can see both sides of the rubber during pre-flight. And you do that to each blade. After the oil cooler, engine compartment, transmission, and rotor system has been inspected, my workflow is I come back down here and continue on the fuselage left side. Once again, check for rivets, any wrinkles in the airframe, not good. Any working rivets, you'll have some black residue around. I check the baggage compartment, push the big button, just like a 206. Kind of a pain sometimes. Here's our oxygen system. Make sure all your cargo, whatever you have in your baggage compartment, even if you're not flying EMS, needs to be properly secured. And once that's done, push the little buttons back. Once again, hinges, proper door function, window function, skids left side. Check the skid tubes, attachment points. We've got antennas. Check underneath the fuselage. Damage. No damage. There's my work stand. I like that thing. Everything looks good. And the other consideration, if you don't have dual controls in, up in the bubble of the aircraft, you're going to have your tail rotor pedals for the co-pilot side. Unless you're in the training environment or the military, you're going to have these disabled most likely. This part comes over from the pilot side. That'll still move, but it's disabled by these little rods, push change links almost, are disconnected and rigidly mounted right here. So yeah, make sure those are properly secured. Nothing resting up in the chin bevel. Here's my pilot side again, medical crew gear, and make sure the security of the hydraulic cowling is closed, and also your wire strike protection. Make sure it's properly mounted. Antennas look good. Once again, do a nice walk around before you fly. If you just overall look for general security, leakage, look for the obvious stuff. It's not rocket science. Just don't be in a rush. And you guys will have a great experience flying the Bell 407. It's a little sports car. One of my favorite aircraft to fly. Let's go move the work stand.